It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet Bain. And before we left, Barnet, you were about to leap off your seat.
Well, I was coming right out of my shoes here.
Yep.
Our guest, of course, is the author of Time Light, Bryan Hubbard. And before the break, Bryan had referred to a blog post that he put up this morning. And he said something that I want to explore more deeply. The thought thinks the thinker. We, on this show, for our listeners, know very well that we frequently, we love to talk about an imagination that imagines itself. And so there is nothing more seductive for me to hear today.
That's right.
Than the thought
you hooked
that
him good,
thinks,
Bryan.
The thought that thinks the thinker. So, Bryan, bring it.
Okay. Well, as I say, just going back on that point, the natural assumption we all have is that there is this I, whatever it is somehow sitting in command center, that it controls its life, it has thoughts, it uses thoughts in order to sort out problems or what have you.
And this is sometimes called the identified self. You can call it the conditioned self.
Yeah,
the kind of way in which I have learned to perceive myself and express myself in the world. But there, in fact, what you're expressing is there may, in fact, be this sort of third self that is yet unknown.
The more.
Well, there are three selves, and they're all, because their energy centers are sending pulses, which the pulses get interpreted by the brain in the present as a thought.
Right.
And that thought, but the idea is that you are thinking, but you're not. The pulses are coming from the centers that are causing the thought, which, if you like, packed into that thought, bundled into it is the idea that there was a thinker having a thought.
So
and
great.
it isn't there. And this is, I know it sounds a bit strange and a bit esoteric, but it's really important because for folk in everyday life, because supposing for a minute, as I say in the blog, supposing I say that, I'm unhappy and I don't really understand this unhappiness, but I'm dissatisfied with my life, things aren't working well for me, so I need to do something about it. And you could do something quite extreme about it. You could, say, I'm going to try and get super rich, going to change my job, going to make some money, going to move house, I'm going to take drugs, I'm going to have sex with lots of people, I'm going to be creative, and, worst of all, I'm going to become enlightened. And yet, all those things are actually predicated on the idea that there is an I in the first place who is unhappy. But supposing it really is just that there are unhappy thoughts.
Yes.
And when you don't have unhappy thoughts, there is no one to be unhappy, because the unhappy thoughts created the subject which says, I am unhappy. But when you think about it even for a moment, you say, well, it's no such thing that I'm unhappy, it's just that there are unhappy thoughts.
It's developmental. And one of the glories of this book for me is that it so frequently has led me to the edge of my trail, and then the trail doesn't just go cold, it disappears. So,
and on this show we call it the edge of possibility.
The edge of possibility,
right.
absolutely. And this book is absolutely, listeners, a map to the edge of all of our adaptive behaviors and conditionings. And what lights me up most is this idea that we are an expression in time-space within this torus of logic and reason. We are an expression of a confluence of energies, the thought that thinks the thinker. And that when we go to the edge of the map, where we begin to become map makers, it is about initiating a relationship with, you call it the potential self, and that's as beautiful a name as any. It is the potentiality that dwells the potential. That's the unfortunate language, but I don't have any other language. It is what is beyond, what is in store for us developmentally, beyond the love affair we have with the straight line, with logic and reason. Mm-hmm. When we begin to have a relationship where we are increasingly aware, so that of where we have been and the forces that have molded us, so that we can be increasingly intimate with the potential self, and we then begin to become time light, less freighted by this mortal coil, more of a dimensional. We become more in the full dance of dimension. There isn't even language. There isn't even language for it, but you do bring us to the promised land.
That's right, and it's bliss. And I think every person listening to this, if this state exists of bliss, is it not your human birthright to have it?
And of course it exists. We would not have an experience of beauty. We would not have an experience. Beauty all by itself exists outside of logic and reason. It is a subjective in terms of definitions, but the paradoxes, the complexities of these energies that are coming from these bodies that you describe, that result in a standing wave that we call an experience of beauty, however subjectively we describe it, that is a communication with the potential self.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing is, it's, I say that my book is really a 65,000-word exposition of one sentence from the New Testament, which I put at the beginning of the book, which was, and everyone knows it, we all know this, it says, except ye be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. We've all been told this since we were 5, and we don't really understand what it means.
The second quote that goes with that is, it's as hard to enter the kingdom of heaven as it is to thread the postern of a small needle's eye.
Well, if you're a rich man. And the reason why is because...
You're dragging around your past
That's
bodies.
right. And I think we can extend this beyond rich man. If you're identified with the
any limiting conditioning.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But just take that back a bit. We say, let's not so much the hardness for us as adults, but go back to the children. And why are they in heaven? And heaven is, for me, another word which just means unity, at one with everything.
They're pre-adapted.
That is heaven. Now, a child, when you watch a little child, he's so time-light, isn't he? Because he's just fascinated by everything and is at one with the world. Because the other part of time is space, isn't it? Yeah. So if we are time-light, there is also no space separating us from the world, which you see with a child. And the other evil side of time heaviness is you become space heavy too, because you become more isolated from the world. You feel separated from the world, and time and space work together to achieve this. And I sort of tell Lynn, I have this lovely joke about what I call the restaurant towel, which is, I know exactly what stage of a relationship young couples are in the restaurant, depending on how close they are to each other, because the more time they've been together, the space seems to increase as well. And but it's true, metaphysical space increases. We feel more isolated, more separate from the world. We feel alien. And as I say in the book, I mean, the Greeks knew this, and they had this term for it, which was anguish. And it's a wonderful word for it. And that's what happens as we grow older and older.
It's a kind of separation, if you will.
It's a separation from that world. Yeah. We don't feel at one with the world or with others any longer. And it's a terrible place to be. And that's hell. That is hell.
Yeah. And it's also, going back to the idea of the bliss, much of what I gather from your work is the identifying with the thought or the feeling, this way that we sort of hook onto them as if they're real, is the kind of hell versus a kind of relieving or releasing of that perception, that it's only a perception, it's not the only perception, and sort of what I hear you saying is there's a way of re-enchanting life.
Yeah, well, and I think we haven't sort of touched on that. So people say, "My God, what a gloomy conversation these guys are having," and what are we supposed to do about that apart from commit suicide? And that is, as you said at the outset, there is this 21-day program which leads you gently through this because, you're dealing with enormous energies here. And, I've known people in the past who've actually got close to this stuff and been quite badly burned by it. So it's very important to do this gradually, to do this with ease and love and kindness. And so there's lots of clever little pressure valves throughout this program, which just bring this in nice and gently into your life. But you do it through, just enormous empathy and understanding of yourself, because you've got to see that these things happen because, you just didn't have a chance. Because the more you build up time, the more you see yourself as separate from the experience, and the more likely you are, as a result of that, to suffer trauma.
Yes, the beauty of...
You're not seeing the whole any longer.
The beauty of this book, as you say, and I want to stress to our listeners that this is certainly not a gloomy conversation. I find it a thrilling conversation. Yeah. We do not have any possibility of shifting the map until we understand the terrain. Until we can locate the door, we have no hope of exiting the cell. And so this is as elegant a blueprint for discovering your own architecture as any that I have encountered. And it has the added gift in the second half of the book of this 21-day curriculum for self-reflection. And there is a lot of pleasure to be derived from these exercises. They are not, they are certainly challenging, though they are not difficult. And you will be very, very well rewarded, and you will be grateful for the time that you spend in devoting yourself to them. So I would encourage our listeners to explore this, to try it out. If it works for you, beautiful, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't. I'm sure Brian will not be offended, but it is very, very beautiful and powerful stuff.
So for listeners who are interested, the website is www.time-light.com. Again, that's time-light.com. And, of course, all the information is there. Brian, we are thrilled that you took the time today to spend this with us, and this evening, I should say, in England, and share this incredible information.